Well, that's a bit of a pickle. Greetings, I'm Solidus Scully, and welcome back to Resident Evil Zero against, well, what is one of the more pain-in-the-ass bosses regardless of which difficulty you play on, because as you can see here, as it sends its little bat spawn out towards you, yeah, likes to confuse your aiming reticle, and don't expect auto-targeting to help very much. And here's another thing I like to do, pick Billy up and just, you know what, I think I'm gonna drop him because I'm a bat. Screech, screech, I'll find some hair to get tangled in, and, I don't know, go bum around off Batman in his Batcave. Not a very long boss fight because easy mode, but even still, it's a bit of a pain in the ass and more so on the harder difficulties. And there you go. Interestingly enough, there was actually an enemy concept in Devil May Cry back when this was Resident Evil 4 stylish with a bat enemy in it. Devil May Cry itself would actually have a bat enemy sort of thing within its gameplay threshold that came in the form of the plasmas, but yeah, they're a lot more tolerable because you can actually hit them and fight them under fair circumstances and not the bullshitty ones. By the way, if you're playing this on a HD collection, a fun bit of trivia I would have had for you would have been that the two of the trophy quotes were actually based on Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. But unfortunately, you already knew that, because of one Sir Isaac Fortescue, the brother of the hero of Gallowmere, Sir Daniel Fortescue, the man without a jaw, fell to the first arrow during the battle against the evil Zarok. But on a serious note though, Sir Isaac Fortescue already pointed it out, and as something of a bit of a side note here, since I am giving him a shout out and he will be punished, justly, with all the whips and chains with no caffeine. Yeah, at time of uploading this video, it would be his birthday a couple of days ago, so, yeah, Sir Isaac, happy birthday to you. Hope you're having a good day with some of the games you recently picked up, which you've, also been discussing in the comments. Yeah, hopefully they walk past the title screen and, just, well, hope you had a good day, and I hope you'll continue to having good days. But anyway, yeah, shout out over, back to the game in question. Yeah, because of the fact that the bat sort of burst through the roof, I guess the mechanism keeping the door locked was shattered, and now Rebecca can come in and enter as she pleases. However, because of the fact that we have a roof shot over there where the bat entered in, yeah, gotta run all the way back and pick up the hook shot. And I bet you're wondering, golly gee, Mr. Solidus Scully, it's a good thing you brought it there. On your first playthrough, how did you know? Well, the thing of it is, I didn't. Until I realized, wait a minute, there's a hole in the roof. I need the hook shot, but where did I leave it? And as it turns out, I left it all the way back in the train where I had to wade through zombies and enemies just to get it back. Again, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Nay, I shall say it 3, perhaps 4, probably 5, 6 to be on the safe side, make it 7, 8, yeah, definitely 9 times. An item box would have solved so many issues, but alas, we need our gimmick because you have to share items with your friends. Because, oh, Billy. Which was also a Jim Carrey movie that shared Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, which was referenced in Resident Evil Zero, and therefore it is fitting commentary. But yeah, we basically need to hookshot our way up to the top of the church, go back around towards that gated area we saw in the last part, go down the ladder, flick the switch to get the power running to the elevator, and head down into our next laboratory area thing where we somewhat learn new revelations. Except not really. It's, well, you know what, I'll get to that in a little bit, but in the meantime, you might be thinking that this will be the last time we need to use the hookshot. Ha. They're not even close. We're not only going to be using it again in this part, but also for the next part. But after that, we shall be rid of our curse. That is the hookshot, grappling hook. Whatever's your poison, the fact that it takes up 2 item spots is really fucking tedious and did not need to be a thing. I mean, it's not like Resident Evil hasn't had some fucking wacko-jacko science fiction shit beforehand. You could have just made it like a palm-sized little Batman-style grappling hook that you could have carried in one slot. Yeah. But whatever, it's neither here nor there in this case. But again, because of the hookshot gimmick, it also requires Billy and Rebecca to be separated again. And on top of the hookshot returning, guess what else also makes a return? The dumbbell... no, that's the wrong thing. The dumbwaiter / service lift gimmick, where you're shuffling items between one or the other. I know I'm jumping the gun a bit and just sort of explaining well, not necessarily plot things, but mainly just gameplay facets that you haven't seen yet, but it's stuff you kind of already done before, and it does continue to highlight a very samey sense of repetitiveness. towards how limited the whole partner mechanic really is in terms of Resident Evil Zero. Like, they obviously didn't want to make them so different that it'd be like having to handle two completely different gameplay styles at once, but at the same time, I also feel like making the characters so similar is also a bit of a detriment. I mean, yeah, Billy obviously has things that only he can do, and Rebecca has things that only she can do, but it's not quite different enough so that it feels fresh and unique whenever you have to switch between characters, and neither does it really feel, well, much beyond the typical Resident Evil stuff. I mean, you're still going through a mansion, which is pretty commonplace for Resident Evil at this point. You go down into a little basement laboratory area, as is typical. You're fighting a mad scientist kind of guy, which is pretty old hat by this stage, and really, it kind of makes Resident Evil Zero feel a bit more repetitive than in fact it shouldn't. It's not as if it's a completely dull and tedious experience, because I mean, you are learning things, and you do have colourful characters and likeable characters to follow. It's just that, well, it just doesn't really do a good job of capitalizing on its strengths, and as a result, a lot of the typical Resident Evil elements that have been refined to a science by this point just feel a little bit played out, which I suppose is both unfortunate circumstances of both the timing of this game and, in turn, well, just how familiar the series have become to people at this point, because yeah, again, I'd only really say more at the time, because, again, considering the tank controls era was really on its last legs at this point, and Resident Evil 4 had yet to really shake everything up, / introduce new people into the fanbase. Yeah, it kind of makes the game look a little bit more robust than in fact it is, and some people have softened on Resident Evil Zero as the HD collection was released and more people had a chance to play it. And again, you know, it was a couple years divorced from the whole, oh, Resident Evil is totally not scary because it is actionized. Resident Evil 5 and 6, teehee. Somehow 4 is exempt from this because it was people's first one. But again, that's cynical reasoning, and I'm just not gonna follow up on that. Anyway, this is our next area. The secret basement / the library, where it seems that this was where James Marcus was conducting his experiments, and as later documents will reveal, / I've already talked about, yeah, part of the reason why Umbrella decided to bring the hammer down on him was because he was the one most perverted by his research. Or rather, his research was perverted by his twisted desires, so to speak. Because, yeah, not only were Umbrella having to cover up the deaths and disappearances of dozens of their employees among, you know, plenty of other refuse that they couldn't feasibly get away with, but in turn, the fact that James Marcus was so fixated on his project rather than, you know, obeying the whims of what Edward, later Alexander Ashford, and what Oswald Spencer would have wanted, is primarily why they wanted him out of the picture. Because, I mean, to kind of create a bit of a, well, divide between the three heads of Umbrella, and I might have brought this up beforehand, but hey, might as well just bring it back for the sake of, you know, talking points. Again, Edward Ashford was pretty much, I think, really the only guy who was sort of running Umbrella as a legitimate pharmaceutical company. Again, it wasn't until Alexander Ashford, who was the father of Alexia and Alfred, that, you know, began the whole Code Veronica thing, where they wanted the T Veronica virus to restore the family to its power, because, well, Alexander Ashford was a bit of a terrible family head. So was Alfred, and Alexia, because she was kind of insane. But yeah, then there was also Oswald Spencer, who did obviously have his own ideas of creating his army of supermen, and his legacy being that of the Wesker children, as Resident Evil 5 would later go on to elaborate on, because are you saying that he was manufactured? But yeah, James Marcus was the one who was basically like, golly gee, I sure do like leeches more than I like humans. Let's use all my employees for my babies, my children. I love leeches very much. I love them putting them on my dick. I love transforming myself into them. That's a bit of a spoiler, but how exactly, you'll find out. But yeah, that's pretty much the main precipice of what we're learning here, which, again, we still have the revelations of who exactly Leechman is, for those of you who haven't played the game, so there is still that mystery keeping you going, but at the same time, though, we're also not really learning too much that feels significant, mind you, which does come into another bit of criticism for Resident Evil Zero, because again, when you were learning about the G-Virus in Resident Evil 2, you were unraveling not just, well, again, I wouldn't say it was juggling plot threads, but it was sort of weaving them together in a way that felt interesting. Because not only did it tie into the current circumstances of Raccoon City being under attack by zombies, but you got to learn about how the research into the G-Virus not only affected, the people in the RPD, which, was where Leon was working for, and also where Claire's brother worked, but in turn you also had the whole plot thread of, Sherry Birkin, how the G-Virus affected their family, and basically just how it screwed the whole town over, whereas James Marcus's work just feels a little bit too isolated, because it never really comes back in any significant way later on in the series, but neither does it really seem to hit, in terms of its own internal context, really. Again, it just feels very sort of out of the way, like they're sort of forcing the whole James Marcus thing into the plot as opposed to having Umbrella be exposed, via other means. Again, I think a lot of this might have more to do with the fact that a lot of Resident Evil Zero's planning was taken from the cancelled Resident Evil 4 Stylish and Castle builds, which again was initially going to focus on the whole idea of, Tony Redgrave, or later on Leon Kennedy, exposing Oswald Spencer and finding out that, the whole Oswald Spencer's son thing. At least that's what the plot of Resident Evil 4 Stylish seemed to imply, that Tony Redgrave would have turned out to have been his biological son. There probably would have been a fight with Wesker somewhere in there, and the plot generally would have gone in what I guess probably would have been a cross between what the original Devil May Cry 1 was like, as well as a bit of DMC 2, given the whole Lucia Arias thing. But again, that's only really speculation at this point. I would absolutely love to have seen, what an early demo build or an alpha build of Resident Evil 4 Stylish would have been like. I don't know if it got to that stage, or if it was just concept and, at least a brief story treatment, but I don't know, it would have been cool to see. But anyway, I feel like as a result of that game's cancellation and continued development hell before we got the Resident Evil 4 that we actually did, it kind of left both Zero and, to be completely honest, Resident Evil 4 itself feeling very disconnected from the series at large. Zero in the sense that, it feels so out of the way, and its connection to the rest of the series feels so forced and tenuous that it's rarely, if ever, brought up again, not just for the factor of, characters like Billy or James Marcus seldom being referenced again, but also in the sense that, again, a lot of Wesker and Birkin's involvement in the plot pretty much stops here, save for one cutscene later down the line, and even in that case, that's information that you could already somewhat figure out for yourself, but that's neither here nor there in this case. And to kind of put Resident Evil 4 in perspective, it's basically Shinji Mikami going, we as James Bond and shit, with Leon and Ashley secure the ballistics, aye. And yeah, that's pretty much all she wrote, really. To kind of get into brass tacks as to what we're actually doing here, it's going through samples and trying to unlock keys in the shape of leeches to unlock more of James Marcus's inner sanctum to kind of find out some revealing truths about the man. Unfortunately, though, we don't really tend to get much of that, so it's time for more trivia. I already kind of talked about Wesker and Burlington. What the fuck? That was meant to be well, fucking autocorrect. What a time we live in. Again, I was already going to discuss the plot point that I already talked about Wesker and Birkin disappearing, but the thing corrected it as Burlington. Fucking hell. But anyway, random trivia I can bring up is that Billy has a Made in Heaven tattoo on his arm, which was designed to be similar to the one on Claire's jacket, which is an ongoing reference to the band Queen. Don't stop me now, we are the champions. You got blood on your face, or mud on your face, they used to say in school whenever we used to have a performance. I don't know why they edited that, but hey, they probably didn't want to scare the kids with blood, even though it exists inside us. And yeah, that's also pretty much our next goal of the now, to hookshot our way inside that little alcove right there, get the train moving, and move on to the final area of the game. And, yeah, that's apart from finding out more shit about Umbrella and collecting documents, yada yada yada, all that good stuff. I suppose there is also one other thing I can talk about in regards to any of this, and I suppose it is, again, symptomatic of how disconnected it is from the series, because we also learn very little about the origins of Umbrella itself, which is a bit, how you say, kind of misleading, because the entire game is meant to be about the beginnings of the Umbrella Corporation, but we don't really learn too much about it. In fact, it's arguable that Resident Evil 5, with the whole Lost in Nightmares DLC and its documents, do a better job of showing why they founded the company, which is because Edward Ashford, James Marcus, and Oswald Spencer were fourth-form school chums. again, they grew up together, they were pretty of wealthy families and of well-to-do. They don't really tend to go into most of that, except for maybe a little bit of Oswald Spencer, and definitely with the Ashford family having a legacy of Veronica to live up to. But yeah, Marcus, on the other hand, we don't really get to see much, so I guess maybe apart from being very learned and the more scientific of the trio, that he was one who had a very isolated childhood and spent a lot of it studying animal specimens and, again, experimenting around with the virus types. So, again, I think that would have been more interesting to learn about specifically why he was so fascinated with leeches, or if he had some misanthropic tendencies. I mean, again, you can infer them, but you never really get enough time to examine what James Marcus is as a person and why he was so warped, and kind of going to the point of both self-destruction and, you know, taking a lot of his employees and mad scientist ethics to, again, help his children, as in the, you know, slugs or whatever, grow. Slugs? No, leeches. Whatever. Same fucking dealio. Again, it's like that it's like that twisted creepiness actor? Yes, he is an angle actor, god, mouth failing, whatever. The point is that it would have added a lot to the game and made James Marcus a lot creepier than in fact he is. I mean, he does have a very unnerving presence, but I feel like the context of, you know, understanding his obsession with the leeches, not just, you know, going, golly gee, leeches are great or whatever, but also just sort of showing, you know, where that obsession began, how you sort of grew up to despise the human form, and again, just sort of, you know, adding that, I guess, sort of that, like, disgust for, you know, the mundane, and I guess, sort of having him turn against his human instincts, really. I don't know. It's something that I feel would have been an interesting way to make the character feel a little bit creepy, and especially give, you know, the whole idea of, again, having his leeches infest different people, and, well, again, I guess having the whole transformation of people into leeches probably would have been a far creepier angle to go with, especially given that, you know, he brings up the whole idea of being an animal, very territorial, and having him hunt down Rebecca and Billy to turn into leech slaves probably would have been fucking bone-chilling, to say the least, and it's a bit of a shame that they don't really kind of follow up on that angle, because I feel like that really would have given him some staying power compared to, you know, the likes of William Birkin, Albert Wesker, or anybody else who had very human sort of motives. I don't know. Could have been something a little bit different, but that's neither here nor there in this case. I know I'm saying that a lot, but it's just really a factor of me saying, what could you really do? It is something that I feel like a remake could capitalize on if they happen to go for Resident Evil 0 next, but again, that's really curious. I was also talking about this with the Media Nerd in the comments section of a couple of videos ago, but again, I'm really not too sure what they would go for next. I mean, if it gets to the point where they're remaking 5 and 6, I mean, what could they really do apart from addressing the very vestigial complaints of Resident Evil 5 is just not scary, or Resident Evil 6 is a mess because multiple stories? I don't know, it's, and I mean, even in that case, like, I mean, when will it get to a point when we start remaking fucking Resident Evil 7? What are we gonna do then? You know, it's, I guess another thing I could also talk about in regards to the remakes, actually, is that, again, as they're going along and having their own remake continuity, which timeline of the games are we following here? I mean, we have Resident Evil 7 and 8, you know, are they continuing off the PS1 game continuity as well? Or is it melding together the remake continuity? Which is real, which is false? And again, it kind of emphasizes the sort of dynamic I kind of had with the whole Umbrella Chronicles Darkside Chronicles, which, for those of you who don't know what it is, it's basically like this fucking Nintendo Wii whatever game that was basically a retelling of Resident Evil 2 and Code Veronica from the perspective of Jack Krauser, who was one of the major players in Resident Evil 4. So, it's meant to be like an alternate perspective kind of thing, or is it meant to be like the true events finally retold-ish, kind of? That's kind of where I'm at with the remakes, really. Which is the official truth? What's the canonical line here? And what's referring to what? I'm guessing that the remakes are in their own thing at this stage, but it's kind of getting difficult to tell, especially as, you know, the PS1 versions of the original games, save for Resident Evil 1, which did get a re-release rather recently, haven't really been remade. Because, I mean, Code Veronica's still there, but we haven't got Resident Evil 2 and 3, which is, eyebrow-raising. Which is kind of a shame, though. They should re-release those two games. Again, they're quite fun PS1 classic tank control Resident Evil games, and I want them, damn it. But in any case, it's time to see a graduation photo of a guy with long hair that seems ill-fitting for the 30s time period. But we'll comment on that next time, so I'm Solid Skelly, keep it new metal, and I'll catch you later.
That guy must be Marcus's son. Or grandson.
Conniptions for the final lecture came here for. The one derivative humanity is the one I abhor. I need a minute to eliminate forever what the everyday bullshit that I did you.